Hello everyone and welcome to Random Ideas About God, episode number 2. So just a quick note, my friend James, who's a graphic designer, he's actually creating a logo for this. So in the future episodes, they'll hopefully be up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and maybe it'll be a separate YouTube channel. So at this point, I would probably say subscribe and like, but since we don't have that set up yet, don't do that just yet. Just keep watching them the way I'm posting them. But this Random Ideas About God is a place for those of us who enjoy helpful philosophical and theological conversations, but without needing a seminary degree to understand them. And the goal of each of these episodes is to take an idea that someone has said about God and to think about what that means for us, how it affects how we think or act, or maybe it's just a fun conversation and it really doesn't affect our lives that much, but it's just something that is enjoyable to talk about. And today's random idea about God comes from a man named James Cone. So Cone was a black theologian who was an advocate for what some call liberation theology. So a little bit of backstory on liberation theology. This is an area of theology that describes God as a liberator, and it originated in the 1960s in Latin America. But even though this is when the ideas kind of got labeled and got a name on them, these ideas have been a part of the Christian conversation for a long time. For example, a lot of black Christians in early America would describe God and what God is doing in the world in the similar ways that liberation theology describes it. So this is stuff that's been around for a while. But the idea with liberation theology is this, it's that God isn't just a set of ideas to ascend to, but that God actually has something to say about how we live our lives, how we structure our society, how we treat our fellow human beings, and especially how we treat those who've experienced oppression and those who lack freedom. But before we read Cone's idea, I have a question for us. How would you define freedom? So freedom is something we value a lot in America, right? It's part of our ethos, our identity. We're a land of the free and home of the brave. It's what we believe we're doing in the world. It's our main project to fight for freedom. But what does it really mean to be free? My hunch is that the way that most people think about freedom, or the way we usually talk about freedom, is related to choices. Being able to do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want to do that. For example, we might say that a prisoner isn't free because, yes, they have certain choices like sitting or standing, watching TV, or reading a book. They also don't have a lot of other choices. So we define freedom based on choice. And a lack of freedom is when someone or something restricts our choice. But then the question becomes, how many choices are enough? Because we don't have an infinite number of choices. Choice is something that will always be limited because we are limited creatures. I can't just choose to sprout wings right now and fly. I can't choose to become my favorite X-Men Wolverine because he regenerates and I think it's really cool. I can't just choose to do those things. Also, what happens when our choices infringe on someone else? Is it freedom if what we're doing prevents others from doing the things they want to do? If you ever watched the movie Kicking and Screaming, you'll remember when Phil, Will Ferrell's character, recruits the 2 Italian boys, and they go on to beat every team that they face. We kind of think of freedom like that, the ability to have what we want with no one in our way. The problem with that idea of freedom is no one else is having fun. And only this small group of people get to have all the fun because they are the ones that have a lack of restrictions and barriers. Or maybe we change our definition of freedom. Because if we define freedom by lacking barriers, then no one is free because no one is able to achieve whatever they want whenever they want. And that kind of freedom infringes upon others. And here's something that's really interesting. We lose the excitement that comes with having an obstacle to overcome, because success really isn't that fun if it was easy to achieve. When I was younger, I played Halo, and I would choose to put the easiest setting on, and I quickly became so bored because there was no risk of failure. The risk of failure is what makes success more exciting. If there's not a chance to fail, then success really isn't that much of an accomplishment. So then we might change our definition of freedom. We might say freedom is the ability to go after our goals. So take an athlete, for example. Maybe from an early age, people begin to observe their abilities. They begin to tell them that they're destined for greatness. Maybe society gives them every opportunity to succeed. They get opportunities to train with the best coaches, to go to the best camps, to compete against the best teams and against the best people. So they have this path before them of success. We, in this definition of freedom, based on our ability to achieve our goals or try to achieve our goals, we would most likely define what they're experiencing as freedom because they're being given every opportunity to achieve. When in reality, they might feel like they have no freedom because they're bound by the expectations being placed on them. In both of these cases, we're defining freedom by the barriers we experience outside of ourselves. But what if instead freedom is something we experience within? Viktor Frankl is one of my favorite authors. He was a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist that studied psychology, and especially the psychology behind people in situations like those in the concentration camps. And this is what he said about freedom. To be sure, a human being is a finite thing, and his freedom, or her freedom, is restricted. It is not freedom from conditions, but it is freedom to take a stand toward the conditions. Maybe freedom isn't about having no boundaries or being given everything that we need to succeed, but rather the ability to find enjoyment and peace regardless of the circumstances, or the ability to define our own circumstances. We can choose to not let our outer circumstances determine our inner disposition. But don't hear what I'm not saying. That doesn't mean we teach people how to be internally free and we don't care about their external circumstances. Again, liberation theology would say quite the opposite, actually. Because some people don't have the ability to take a stand towards their circumstances because the situation tells them that they are wrong in their stance. That's where James Cone comes in. And his idea about God, he says this: it is impossible to speak of the God of Israelite history, who is the God revealed in Jesus Christ, without recognizing that God is the God of and for those who labor and are overladen, those who are oppressed, those who are not free, those who are in need of liberation. The main thrust of liberation theology in Cone's work is that the thing that God is doing in the world isn't simply creating a set of arbitrary rules or conditions that people need to abide by to be in, but that God is actually doing something. That God is liberating people from the situations that are keeping them from being fully free. And for those of us who care about others, that it is our job to figure out where God is doing that liberating work and to join in the work. The two foundational pieces of this theology, liberation theology, come from the story of the Israelite slaves who were set free in Exodus. And the idea being that the reason that God worked in this group of people was to show what God was doing in this world. And then it also comes from the words that Jesus says in front of a crowd as he's describing who he is. In the book of Luke, in the New Testament, Jesus stands up in front of his home crowd in his hometown, and he gets kicked out after this, which is a whole different story. But this is what he says: "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Jesus identifies himself as the one who has come to set those who are oppressed free, to bring news that's good to the poor, and to bring recovery for the blind. Which is why for Cone, and for many people, including me, believe that God is liberating people in this world, that is the thing that God is doing, that God came to set us free from the things that hold us back from being fully free. But what does that mean? Well, freedom is a whole list of things in the theology conversation. And many of them are internal. But as I mentioned before, it's not just the external things. It's also freedom from the external situations, our system, society, culture. But it's my belief that the people that are holding others back, the people that are oppressing other people, are doing it because they haven't yet truly experienced internal freedom. That they are trying to achieve some external freedom leading to harm to others because they haven't found that internal freedom within themselves. What is God trying to set us free from? Well, one of the biggest existential crises in the human experience is death. And I believe God is trying to offer us hope so that we don't allow the fear of death to overcome us and consume us. God frees us from the scarcity mindset, which says there's not enough. This is one of the main messages that God seemed to be trying to tell the Israelites. He fed them in the desert every single day. And some believe that story was an anecdote. Some believe it was real. Wherever you land on it, the message is just as powerful. God is trying to tell us that we will be taken care of, that there is enough resources, enough love, enough attention, enough care. Wherever we feel like there is a lack, there is enough. And you know what's crazy is we throw away so much food in America. When people took the numbers of the amount of food that we grow and make in this world, we actually have enough food to feed every single person in the world. Liberation theology would say that the people that are experiencing hunger when there's enough food to go on around in the world are in need of liberation, and we need to do that work. See, God tries to remind us that we've been taken care of in the past. That life is such a gift in and of itself, so we should just experience joy within that gift. When we accept our own freedom, we're able to freely help others. We're able to let go of the ideas or structures that oppress others because we know there's enough to go around. We know that we're taken care of. We know that death does not truly defeat us. As Frankl says, true freedom is the ability to take a stand towards our circumstances. True freedom is the ability to find joy even within our own circumstances. That's coming from a man who experienced the Holocaust. So I don't take his words lightly. Go and experience the freedom you have. Fight for the freedom of those who do not have it. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time. Another Random Ideas of God. I'm out.